I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Barry Lyndon is over. In my profession, we hear many such stories. Yours is one of the most intriguing and touching I've heard in many weeks. Barry Lyndon, Andy Kubrick. Oh, here we go.
Your favorite director.
My favorite director. What should we? I'm interested in. Have we talked about Barry Lyndon before at all, just as friends?
I don't think so.
I don't think we have.
It hasn't come up in conversation.
That would be weird if it just came up. It's, hey, Andy, you remember Barry Lyndon? Nobody remembers Barry Lyndon. And you know what? You know what? I think that's a crime.
Oh, look at you. Look at you. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because we've covered we've covered Dr. Strangelove, 2001, and The Shining. I think those are the only three. Oh, and The Killing. So we've covered those four Stanley Kubrick films on our show in the past for various different series. And now we're coming into this one. And my recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection from you is that you really enjoyed The Killing and Dr. Strangelove and The Shining. And 2001 is the one that you have serious issues with.
Yeah.
And so
even Clockwork Orange, I really enjoy of Kubrick's. Right. Like we didn't talk about it, but
yeah. But of the ones we've talked about. And so it's interesting because I really loved Barry Lyndon. I absolutely, my wife walked out about halfway through. She's just like, what? This is only part 2? I thought it was about to end. This is so boring. And she just took off. So I was like, oh, sorry, I'm loving it. But she just was done.
So funny.
But I was like torn on what you were going to think about this, because as I watched it, I'm like, I could see this very easily falling into the 2001 realm for Pete, where it's just slow and boring and he just doesn't connect with it at all. So it's exciting that it's something that you seem to enjoy.
Ryan O'Neal carries a lot of water in this movie, of course. I find him enormously charismatic.
Although he actually only carries empty buckets at one point. I never actually see him carrying water.
I see what you did there. I applaud it.
I always try to throw your dad joke in when I get a chance.
You got one. And now you're going to hold off until next week. From now on today, we're done. We're done. Okay. I think this represents a really interesting. It's an interesting sort of data point, and I wonder if this is why it was sort of forgotten, because it's like the transition from Kubrick's like super emotional intensity epic, Clockwork Orange, to his kind of existential detachment of The Shining, Eyes Wide Shut era, and it's like right in the middle, and it's in so many ways, it's a very simple story. It's forgive me for saying this to all those of like-named personages, it's a Peter Principle movie. It's a guy who just sort of fails up, and he's aspirational, right? He has desires, but it's also kind of a dog that catches the car story. He's terrible when he actually does get what he wants. He's very bad at it. And I find that enormously satisfying. And I'm going to get this out of the way. I think maybe more than any movie that we have watched together, I can't believe I'm saying this, I don't think the movie works without the voiceover.
That's kind of a shock to hear you say it, because I know you have a real issue with voiceover. But I also know that when voiceover is done well and done properly, that you can appreciate that. It's only when voiceover is done in a way where it just feels like they didn't know how else to tell the story, so they're just going to get a bunch of exposition out through some voiceover that just doesn't need to be there. And I agree with you. I think this voiceover is a fascinating example of how to do narration in a film. It's not a character we ever meet. It's like a God sort of character, all-seeing, who can see forward and backward into the story and gives us information like hints that something bad is going to happen to Barry or to their son or whatever in the narration before it happens, as if all of this is already destined, right?
Right.
Like
right.
It's fascinating. So do you want to say more about how it worked for you?
Well, there is a very small, simple part of me that thinks that maybe a sophisticated British narrator is always going to work, because I'm a big Attenborough head, as you know. I do think that part works, but the other piece is it's a fable. It's presented as a fable. Like you almost can feel the storybook opening as if somebody is reading to you about the story of Barry Lyndon, and I find that I so emotionally connected with that, with the intent of that, with the spirit of it, with the emotion of it, the way the thing works from the jump, telling me the story and allowing us to jump through time very efficiently. And I will say, like, this is a long movie. It's just a couple of minutes over 3 hours. And unlike some movies that are 3 hours and feel shorter, or that are in 90 minutes and feel like 3 hours, I would say this one feels exactly like 3 hours. Like, it's a long movie. I didn't find myself falling asleep during it, but it doesn't operate at a particularly breakneck pace. Still,
no, that's true.
The voiceover is a reminder of my role in the story, bearing witness to Barry's exploits, and I found that interestingly sort of contemporary, and really engaging.
It's interesting because the original novel, William Makepeace Thackeray's novel, The Luck of Barry Lyndon, and then I think it was actually re-released as the memoirs of Barry Lyndon, something like that. I know when I went to see if I could find the audiobook version of it, that was how it was listed. The book is actually told first person by Redmond Barry, aka Barry Lyndon, and Kubrick specifically opted to not go that route because he felt that first person, like it was a little more of a comic tone in the way that Barry provided it, and it also gave you a sense that there's a little bit more of this unreliable narrator in the way that he's describing things. And he wanted to pull that out because he felt that for the film, it would work better to kind of extract that personality from the tone of it. And that's interesting because we've also had that sort of story where it's a first person narrator and we're hearing it told by the person who we're watching.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it also turns out to be an unreliable narrator, right? And so I think that, I don't know, for me, I, like you, there was something that created this novelistic tone by having this over this omniscient voice, kind of just sitting there describing this story to us and giving us this sense that we need to be paying attention because he's telling us things that are going to happen. And so we're kind of watching the pieces fall into place. And so, I don't know, for me, it felt important to have made that change.
Interestingly, I have a screenplay dated February 18th, 1973, and the voiceover is all first person. The original, it seems like the original draft was all written from the perspective of Barry telling his own story. And I could not agree with you more. I mean, I think that decision to separate Barry from the storytelling was really smart.
Yeah.
Really smart. So that works really well. And I think what's the other piece is having the narrator allows us to experience what is otherwise minimalist dialogue in the film. Like there isn't a lot of monologuing going on in this movie. It allows us to jump into scenes very quickly and already have context. And so this sort of minimalist dialogue works, I think, as better as social satire. We get a lot of silences. We get a lot of stilted formal language that is read as subtextual thanks to the setup from the narrator. And I think that is it just makes wit effortless in this movie, and especially in the first act, right? The part one. And this isn't really a 3-act kind of a thing, right? This is a more of a classical tragedy. We have the build up in the beginning and the crash down at the end. And I think the style of how he presents words, whether by narrator or character, is perfect for the style that he's going for, that classical sort of tragic tone.
Yeah, and I think it speaks more to the character of Barry Lyndon as we're kind of watching this character who, as you said, is this person who has ambitions, but really is just not great about achieving anything. And he kind of, gets to various places, but I don't know, he's never really very good at anything. And he just ends up in a place where he's just, he's pretty much lost and drunk. And at the end of it, he's overspent the money and has just nothing left, and is essentially just, with the loss of his son, is just kind of like essentially turned catatonic.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we end with this, or as we get close to the end with this character who's just fallen off the map. He's just like any sense of importance has been driven out because of his desires, but also as we get a sense of, like, he does have this driving sense of personal affront and what he thinks is right, which like from the beginning. And I don't know, is all of that because his dad had been killed in a duel early in his life? I don't know, but we find out he excels at sword fighting. He excels at boxing. He excels at just fighting in general. And, from the jump, he's in love with his cousin and is pissed off that this other suitor has not only taken interest in her, but is the one who's the victor because he actually has money and can pay. And so Barry, puts himself into a situation where now he's going to duel this guy. And like, we see him getting into these situations over the course of it because he's just so hot-headed. And it ends up in many ways being his downfall.
It is. And, don't forget, the suitor has regimentals, right? Like, he is an officer and looks mighty good in his regimentals, according to the cousin. And I think there is very much an issue of Barry struggling with his relationship with authority or perceived authority. The really interesting part of his character is that he does not seem to have much behind all of his emotion, like his emotional reaction to the world. Like, he's angry and smart. You think he's smart. He's talented, right? Skilled, as you say. But again, that second act is a little bit flummoxing because he demonstrates he's really, really bad with money and doesn't have a lot of aspiration beyond like the here and now, like what is immediately and next, as evidenced by him, literally riding away with the horse with those two guys who were bathing together in the river. He just takes a horse and leaves because it was an escape of opportunity, right? It wasn't premeditated at all. Before we get too far, I want to step back and get some screenplay comments, because one of the things that's interesting, I haven't read a lot of Kubrick screenplays directly, but one of the things I'm most interested in is in reading this screenplay, Kubrick has in some places page after page of screen notes. They're like it's like reads like a journal, and it's unlike many other screenplays that I've read that seem to do that old thing where you like leave room on the page for discovery on set, right? Leave room on the page. This feels like very much a cognitive screen blueprint from Stanley Kubrick. Are you a Kubrick? Have you read any other Kubrick screenplays? Does this seem familiar? What is the strategy behind doing this? It seems like a thing that only an auteur could get away with.
Yeah, I haven't read any of his screenplays, but I have seen screenplays like this. And generally, it is the situation where it's going to be a writer-director, the only writer on it, and they are directing it. And they have kind of the authorial voice as to what's going to happen. And they're much more free to put in extra notes into the screenplay so that they know what they're wanting to see, so the actors have a sense of it. And it makes for a totally different sense of how you handle a screenplay. But I have seen it before, and that's generally the case. So, a writer director can usually get away with that sort of thing because it's theirs.
It's like I would expect it from somebody like, I don't know, Paul Thomas Anderson, right? Or Wes Anderson for, all the Andersons would do this. Maybe a Yorgos Lanthimos, like who else? Scorsese. I don't know. Like this is what I would expect.
Scripts.
Yeah, right. Like this is, I feel like this is an
Walter
influential
Hill,
style.
Walter Hill scripts were actually much thinner. Like he had a really sparse writing style to the point where there's much less on the page.
Interesting.
But probably the inverse, where he in his head knows what he is actually wanting to be on the screen. So he's okay putting less on the page.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I found it I found it really interesting the way this thing was put together and the way it walks you through quite visually what the story is. It's worth peeking at. So
interesting.
That's screenplay.
Well,
101 half.
And since we're talking about some of that, it's definitely worth jumping into kind of the overall look and tone of this film, because it is such a huge part of it. It's just, it is a stunning film to look at from start to finish. The cinematography, production design, costume design, everything just speaks to just a master craftsman in building this amazing film. The fact that he was patterning so much of the looks off of paintings of specifically William Hogarth, that was one of the artists they were looking at, but also just the very specific use of the Zeiss lenses that they were they retooled so that they could actually film in candlelight with a number of different scenes. And I think that the lenses that they used had the lowest f-stops in history. It was like a 0.07. Yeah, 0.07. So it's, crazy.
NASA was using them. They were NASA lenses.
Yeah.
That's sexy.
Right, for moon landing and stuff.
I can't say that. I've never used anything NASA used. I mean, Velcro.
Yeah.
I'm going to think about it. Kool-Aid. Velcro Kool-Aid. Sure. That's me and NASA. Sure. Kubrick gets Zeiss lenses.
I think Tang, not Kool-Aid.
Right, it's Tang. Oh, Andy, I'm shamed.
Yes, indeed.
All right. How does it talk to me about the? Let's talk about Barry, because he's a really interesting. Like, how do you characterize Barry Lyndon? He's a protagonist, definitely the protagonist of film. How does he, to your eye, subvert our sort of expected hero's journey?
Well, in many ways, it's the anti-hero that we're getting here. So that's the first thing, is that he is our protagonist, but he's not really heroic. He's just kind of falling into situations over and over through the film and meeting people and ending up doing one thing and then doing another thing. And he kind of just happens into a lot of the stuff in his life. I think that I think that by casting Ryan O'Neal in the role, we're getting, it's funny because Ryan O'Neal, I enjoy Ryan O'Neal. I think he works really well on things like What's Up, Doc and Paper Moon. There are other times where I find him to be a little empty in his performances. Like he was kind of that 70s pretty boy and he worked really well to kind of play that. But in some ways it works really well for this character because like he is kind of like, there's this sense of vacancy
100%.
Yeah. But at the same time, he gives a really compelling performance. Like you can see subtle emotions on his face at various points as different things are happening or whatever. And I think that brings a lot to what we're getting with this character, who is kind of like just kind of wading through the mire of life, trying to figure out how to come out on top. Like, that's what he's doing. Is it going to be gambling? Is it going to be working as a spy? Is it going to be wedding the right person? Whatever it's going to be, he wants to just kind of like keep trying to do something where he can suddenly make a lot of money. And so that kind of emptiness in the performance and the character really works. And I think it even is amplified by the fact that we have the narration over the course of the film. So we can kind of get this sense of what's going on, and we're just now watching this empty vessel kind of like shuffling along through it as if he really has no say in what's going to happen. It's just like everything that is going on is kind of like destined to happen. And it just is like, he's just kind of like moving through it. And so I don't know, I just find that so fascinating. And then he has those outbursts of anger when things seem to really not go his way. And what I found really fascinating is he's a man who lost his father when he was young and had, I guess you could say, a father figure in, was that his uncle? I can't remember who that guy was who was also a captain.
Yeah, who said, I'm going to give you, as long as I'm alive, you shall not want. And the next day admits he lost almost everything to gambling. Don't worry. Kiss me, my boy. I'll never see you again.
Yeah, right. And so like his father figure situation. And then he kind of, in some way, he ends up in different situations where he has somebody who is, I don't know, I guess you could say a father figure, as if he needs somebody to help guide him along. Right. So after that guy dies, Captain Grogan, I believe, then he ends up, that's when he flees the British army, ends up getting forcibly recruited into the Prussian army when they find out that that he had kind of
abandoned his post. He was AWOL.
He deserted. And Captain Pottsdorf, he ends up saving Captain Pottsdorf when a thing collapses on him. And then Captain Pottsdorf kind of becomes his new father figure, and he's working with him. And then he's recruited to spy, and it ends up being this Chevalier who actually is another faker, who is an Irishman from his home country. And so he ends up kind of like becoming his new kind of like father figure, and he goes into all the gambling, and all of that happens. And he's just like, he can't do anything unless he also gets somebody else to help guide him along. And then he finally stumbles into meeting Lady Lyndon. And that's when he kind of does the whole thing of wooing her. Her husband dies, and they marry, and they have a kid. And that moment when he has the kid is like where you actually see a different sense of Barry, right? He actually is like excited to be like a father. He's actually, now he is somebody to actually give all that love to. And that was an interesting sequence.
I think it's an interesting sequence, but how do you stack Lord Bullingdon to that, right? Lord Bullingdon was the original child from the first, from the original husband. And I think, his relationship with Lord Bullingdon is as important as his relationship with his own child, because Lord Bullingdon, he is unable to demonstrate that he's learned anything from all of these other found father figure relationships in trying to create one of him for himself. Like, he is just unable to break through, and ultimately his efforts just continue to build to sort of foment rage in Lord Bullingdon, who goes from this whelpy little kid to this vengeful man by the end, who just wants to see Barry dead, which is, it's very much a idiot Hamilton to Aaron Burr kind of a relationship.
It speaks to the nature of the connection, and Barry doesn't see any value in the relationship with Lord Bullingdon, right? His value that he sees is with Lady Lyndon, who he marries. And I mean, he even knows, as his mother reminds him, until you get a title, you're going to be nothing if she dies. Like all of that money is going to go to the first son. You'll get nothing. Your son with her will get nothing. You'll be left out in the street. And that's that element that I don't know, because of that, it always makes Lord Bullington a little bit of a rival, right?
Yes,
like he can't, and the fact that I think from the jump, Lord Bullington, when he was a young boy, already didn't like him. He was very smart child, and actually great child performance.
Yes.
I loved him as a kid, and how he talked to the chaplain that was his like teacher and everything. And he's just like, I can tell he's just here for her money, and I'm upset at my mother for buying into it. Like it's a fascinating conversation that he has, where he recognizes all of this, and so he's very intuitive and understands that this is a gold digger.
And Lord Bullington has a very strange relationship with his own mother. They need to do a little bit of separation work.
You say that, but you also make it sound like it's much more perverted than it is. I think it's just a child and his mother. And he's protective. I think he's protective. I don't think it's anything more than that.
Okay. Oh, all right. Just saying. A little separation work. Just a drip. Separation work.
Oh my.
The ultimate undoing of Barry comes in how he handles, it handles his loans, right? That's kind of a subversive commentary on late stage capitalism from Kubrick here, because we have a guy who weirdly is an 18th century gig worker, right? I mean, that's what he's doing. He's essentially driving Uber and DoorDash, and he's just trying to make ends meet wherever he can, opportunistically. And when he finally achieves success, he doesn't know what to do with it, and success is in many ways stacked against him already, right? Like the way you have to live to maintain that standard of living is precarious. And that's part of the second act theme, is the fragility of aristocracy, that he almost made it, but he didn't quite. And his one outburst when he, tried to publicly kill his child in front of everybody, his stepchild in front of everybody at the party, was his ultimate. He was canceled, right? He was canceled. I could not help but think how sort of prescient the film is. Makes it super timeless.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's a fascinating example of how that society works. And your wording of fragility, I think, is a great way to describe it, because it really is incredibly delicate as to how you have to go about working to get a title. Right. It's a huge process. He brings in this friend that is trying to teach him the way. And as you said, it requires him to spend a lot of money to buy all these fancy paintings. But at the same time, you also get this sense that Barry is probably overdoing it, and he's not doing it smartly. And I think that's another thing that we see, as he's just spending ridiculous amounts of money on these paintings and everything. It's like, you never hear Lord Wendover. He's the guy who is kind of overseeing Barry in his quest to get this title. You never see Lord Wendover really saying anything to Barry, like, slow down, you don't need to buy that giant painting for a ridiculous sum of money. Like, you don't see that, but you kind of get a sense as Barry continues just spending insane amounts on things that, some of it is probably necessary, but I just had a sense that Barry is just going overboard, probably because he's in this, like, I got to get more, because if I get more, I'm going to get the title. And you just see him like, this is what the solution is. So I'm going to go all in, and I'm just going to keep spending it. And I think that ends up becoming his problem. And he's never able to kind of figure out, like, he's not somebody who understands the nuances of what really it takes. Like, what is Lord Wendover really actually telling him to do? Is Barry really going to be, because Wendover has that kind of speech early on, like, it's a great person. I'm looking for somebody who's great. And I can't remember the exact wording, but like he's looking for somebody who's not necessarily rich, who's not necessarily like well-loved, but it's just somebody who's great, who has that, je ne sais quoi. Like that's what he's looking for. And he never really says it, but at some points I kind of think he already knows Barry's not really somebody who actually has that. But hey, I'll give it a go with him and see if we can make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting because I think you're picking apart, again, I'll go back to the absurdity of late stage capitalism. The irony, or I guess the satire, is that ambition becomes irrelevant in the face of aristocratic ritual. Right? Like what Barry is doing is just falling into, he's like on rails, on the aristocratic rails. And in many ways, nobody could say anything. No father figure could possibly say anything that would have gotten him off of those rails. I don't think, because I think that's another character attribute of Barry, which is his opportunism means he doesn't really listen to others.
Yeah.
He takes the opportunity that's in front of him and no one else.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like you could see some of that when he's talking to the people, his friends, we'll just say, about that painting, that one of them has that huge painting on the wall. And Barry's like, I like the way that he uses the blues. How much is this painting? And he's like, oh, well, I don't know. It's kind of priceless. And he's like, no, really, well, how much? And you can see them looking at each other like, this guy's kind of crazy. And Barry doesn't catch on to any of that. Like, you don't need to buy that painting. Like, yeah,
we're in many ways trying to help you right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He just doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a whole thing. And I think that really is a lot of the elements that bring him down, because I mean, also I think there is a relationship with his own mother that fuels that, because she sees these things that, you don't have a title, you got to get that. She pushes him into that. So that's definitely an issue. And she's kind of like, dismisses the chaplain, and she's seeing a lot of these things that helps create enemies and creates problems for her son. But at the same time, I just think that he puts himself into these situations and makes it harder and harder. And, I think, is there work he could have done to cement things and find a way to be friends with Lord Bullington when he was young? Probably. But Barry he'll never see that. He only ever sees the rivalry. He only ever sees the problem in his quest to achieve something greater.
Yeah. How'd you feel about the film's use of sound and score? I made notes.
It's funny. There are often films that overuse a theme or a song to the point where I'm like, oh my God, can they stop with this song and do something else? But the Handel's Sarabande for the keyboard suite in D minor that is played throughout, I thought it worked really well for me. And it got to a point when we're in that final duel where it's all done with like a bass and drums, and that's it as far as the instrumentation. I'm like, this is genius, the way to kind of use that classical piece, but retool it where it just becomes this like deep, dark kind of like a heartbeat underneath that entire scene, that it just played so well. I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic use of that particular piece. And the rest of the music was great, but that piece throughout, I mean, Kubrick is so smart with classical music, and the way he ties it into his films. 2001 is a great example. But here, I'm just like, that is just this top-notch use of a piece.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the Handel piece, of course, Schubert, Bach, they're used throughout. The Irish lament "Women of Ireland" by Sean O'Riordan is in there. I'm not familiar with that piece originally, but it is beautiful. There is something really interesting about how hushed this film is, right? There is a pairing of this beautiful, refined classical music with brutal imagery, right? And that seems like also a Kubrick fingerprint, right? We're going to put these characters, these two army regiments, redcoats and bluecoats, walking toward one another, and they're just being brutally massacred in proper order to classical music or just really subdued diegetic sound. Like, I think we're just left having to face what we see in a way that is manipulative only by what we see, right? It's not like we're adding a score to make the scene. I think he made a choice to force us to try to be uncomfortable with what we're watching, with how war was waged and how individuals were impacted. And I thought it was beautiful, cold, observational, weird for a movie that is ostensibly a satire and a critique of economic critique.
This is one of those interesting examples, kind of like The Sting, where the score is made up of pre-existing pieces, but retooled for the actual score. And so Leonard Rosenman came in and kind of like worked on how to retool all of these pieces specifically for the film. And, it was also a key time in Oscar history because they actually had a category specifically for this type of score. So it worked well for it. But yeah, I love the way that the music plays throughout this.
Yeah. All right. What have we missed before we get to the end? What else is on your list?
Well, I just, I already talked about the cinematography a little bit and just kind of the lenses and everything. But I also just want to say, like, as far as how Kubrick works shots and camera and everything, zoom has always been something that Kubrick has used all the way up through the end with Eyes Wide Shut. Like, he just always has integrated zoom. And even after people have said, oh, the zoom lens is kind of outdated, we'd rather just get a trucking shot in there, it feels more natural, he still would use the zooms. And I think that they're really effective when he uses them because he finds a way to use them to enhance different moods and everything. And it doesn't feel like, oh, it's a cheap man's dolly when he does it. Like, he finds ways to just put it in a particular place to enhance a particular moment where we see like Barry standing on a bridge or something, and like a great two shot that slowly just zooms out so that we can kind of see him kind of feeling like we're getting swallowed by the landscape. And so a lot of great zooms and dollies and trucking shots with characters. I always think of one where Barry has first kind of like fallen for Lady Lyndon, and she leaves that little gambling table that they're all at, and Barry comes out to talk to her, and there's a tracking shot as Barry comes out, and the camera kind of tracks with him until he kind of joins her, and it becomes a two shot. And I always think about how that's a shot that Wes Anderson paid homage, stole, however you want to say it, in Rushmore. And so it's like he just simple things like that become things that people recognize as really cool camera moves and interesting ways to use the two shot, the dolly shot, and also the handheld shot. Like, he also knew when to go handheld. And there are some great handheld sequences, like in the duels, the boxing, the wars. And I just felt like, I don't know, it was nice to see him really throwing everything in as far as the camera,
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I thought the camera was just perfectly appropriately active. And when it was passive, was deeply intentional. And I felt really connected to that too.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. All right. We have to talk about the final duel.
Yeah.
Because the final duel is, it's important. I think for the film, it's really important for Barry, because I feel like we've spent the last, 40 minutes dragging Barry. And so I would love to know what your take is on the final duel, Barry's actions in the final duel against his own adoptive son.
It's a fascinating sequence, the way it plays. I mean, it's such a gripping, that whole thing was just thrilling. The way the whole thing played with the accidental misfire and the vomiting, like everything worked so well in context of what we were doing there. And I have to feel to some extent that at that particular point, Barry recognized much of the error in his ways. Like that was kind of my sense, is he recognized that Lord Bullington has cause to be angry at him for making a mess of things. And I don't know. I felt in that moment that Barry could see some of that, and so chose to deliberately shoot into the ground instead of shooting at him. Like I felt he recognized he justly has a problem with me. I don't think I don't have any issues with him, and so I'm not going to shoot at him.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page there. I think you're right. The vomiting is a tell, and I think it gives Barry the opportunity to recognize the vulnerability in this young man who he is helped to raise, however poorly, right? He helped to raise. And there's something about him making a choice. And I think you could argue the only truly active, morally conscious choice Barry ever makes in the film is this one right here, right? It's that he decides to spare Bullingdon because I think he becomes aware that he no longer sees the point in perpetuating destruction in his family. His family is already exhausted. It's accounts of destruction. I think the question that I have on it is it a hollow gesture, right? Like, because everything else that Barry does is performative. Is this him behaving nobly just as he's about to lose everything so that it makes him appear noble? Like, is this the ultimate sort of peak of satire of the film, that when he finally acts like a gentleman, Bullingdon, his adoptive son, shoots him anyway and sends him into exile?
I mean, a great possibility. And I think that's interesting because you could, I don't know, you have to imagine like how much foresight does Barry actually have? Like, does he recognize at this point that if he stays where he is, if he actually shoots this kid, we know he's a great shot. We've already seen that. And so we imagine that he probably would take Lord Bullingdon out right away. Does he recognize that if he actually does that, it's going to put him into straits with his wife, who's probably going to be pissed, maybe leave him, put him into a place where he ends up having no money.
Yeah.
And so it could be a very selfish act. By doing it this way, he's maybe hoping for what exactly happens, that he's going to be exiled, sure, but hey, he's going to get $500 a year for it.
Right.
And he'll be able to, as long as he doesn't come back, sure, I'll do that. And I can have a stipend that I can run off with and do what I want to do. And as he goes off and does his gambling, he still doesn't make anything. But so that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, because isn't it a funny indicator that Barry, our protagonist, ostensibly our change character, doesn't actually grow at all. Like, he just finally stops fighting the things that are standing in his way. He just finally acquiesces, but he doesn't actually grow in character, I don't think.
No. And yeah, I mean, in the scope of like change character, that sort of thing, I feel like a lot of that also is much more modern screenwriting. And I don't know if this is so novelistic that I don't know if that's necessarily, something that we could say with his character where he's intended to be changing, or he's changing others, because he's also not really changing others. It's and again, a lot of that speaks to the narration, again, this sense that we have this predestined tale that we're going to tell of this character as he just kind of like stumbles from one thing to another.
It's an interesting sort of Kubrickian fingerprint, again, that that here we have this character who finally acts with principles, and principles don't ever protect you from consequences, right? If we've learned anything from Kubrick's other films, like consequences must be paid. And it kind of doesn't matter who you are. It's a bit fatalistic, Kubrick. Bit fatalistic, you might say.
Yeah. It's also, I like how the film gives us this epilogue at the end that kind of wraps up this particular period of time, where we get this sense that this was how things were, but even then it was pretty limited. Like right after all of this, and Barry went through all this, everything kind of equaled out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, so it's like, so he went through all of that, and had he kind of gotten through all of that, maybe it wouldn't have mattered so much.
Yeah. George III ultimately is saddled with responsibility. I don't remember what the actual final title card was in the movie. I didn't write it down. But in the final screenplay, is it the same? It was in the reign of George III that the above-named personages lived and quarreled, good or bad, handsome or ugly, rich or poor. They are all equal now.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it said.
Yeah, so it's a funny way to kind of assign blame to royalty for all that we just watched, the puppets that we just watched, act out their scene. But really, we're putting our targets right on the back of the highest royals.
And which is interesting, because we get to a point, like you could say that's almost kind of that peak moment for Barry, when he's in that line and he actually gets to talk to the king, right? When the king is coming down and has that moment. Like that is potentially the moment where things could turn for him, where he could actually, if he said the right thing, if he did the right thing, and the king really remembered him, could that have been a moment to have been granted the title? But it doesn't quite, like the king talks to him briefly, but it also doesn't seem like it's exactly enough,
Yeah, right.
And then he goes off and does, really stupid thing by attacking his stepson.
Right.
Bringing the whole castle down, the Tower of Cards.
Right. And I mean, just like there, I sort of don't know who Kubrick is talking to. Is Kubrick talking to us, or to contemporaries of the film that we just watched? Because they're all equal now. To us means the entire era is dead, and they're all equal in dirt. But if they're talking to contemporaries at the time, then they're saying, look, this immediate political era ended, and now we're on to different things, and we're all equal because of the change in, practical politics.
It made me think of a film I watched recently called Ridicule, which was when did that film come out? In 96. And that film is about the 18th century France specifically. And it's really that's also about the aristocracy and kind of how corrupt it is, and how in order to gain social status, you have to be able to just really be good at witty insults and like ridiculing people, and be able to throw those things back and forth. And it also is about how quickly that rose, and then how it also ended up collapsing. And so you can see that in this particular period of European history, there are these moments where there ends up being these big social class, different separations, and it all ended up just kind of falling apart because you can't survive on that type of society for very long.
Right. Fragile.
Yeah.
Fragile.
Yeah.
Oof. What a movie.
I loved it. Great movie. Glad to have added it to the list. And, I think for 50 years, I think this film definitely holds up, kind of speaking to this whole sense of this particular series. Like this one really stands out as, I think, as you said, you can see how it ties into modern society. Like it really it fits, and it stands the test of time.
For sure. I wholeheartedly agree. And I love that we got to watch this after all those crazy Ju-on movies.
All right. Well, we'll be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Bach, performed by Aviva H., Carmel Quartet, Ian Post, Oriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.
And this is me.
Letterbox, right?
Yeah.
Whew, good.
Ah, my dear compatriots in the grand realm of cinematic discourse, what? I do hope you'll indulge me as I regale you with the most extraordinary proposition. Allow me to introduce you to a veritable mecca of film appreciation, a digital sanctuary that caters to the most refined and erudite of cinematic palates. Letterboxd. Letterboxd, old bean, is a virtual Shangri-La for those who possess a truly discerning eye for the kinetic landscape. It is a hallowed haunt where the hot monde of film fanciers flock to catalogue, critique, and engage in the most riveting of intellectual repartees regarding the silver screen spectacles that have left an inexpungible impression upon their highly honed headspaces. By procuring a Letterboxd Pro membership, you'll gain ingress to an ad-free cinematic elysium, permitting you to fully submerge yourself in the effulgent realm of film without any plebeian perturbations. You'll have the singular honor of curating your own custom-tailored compilations, flaunting your unrivaled erudition, and establishing your own idiosyncratic filmic canon. For those amongst you with the most fastidious of palates, a patron membership is the paramount incarnation of cinematic sumptuousness. Not only will you be conferred with all the extravagant emoluments of a pro membership, but you'll also possess the capacity to individualize your profile and critiques with your own meticulously curated visuals, guaranteeing that your unimpeachable aesthetic is incontrovertibly apparent to all who have the serendipity to scrutinize your Letterboxd persona. As a munificent overture to those of you with an exceptionally discerning eye for excellence, we are proffering an unparalleled 20% reduction on both nascent Letterboxd memberships and reiterations. Simply peregrinate to the nextreel.com/letterboxd or enter the promotional cipher NEXTREEL when enlisting or renewing to commence your odyssey into the most exalted stratums of cinematic veneration. The velvet curtains are parting, and the proscenium is poised for you to assume your rightful station amidst the most illustrious cognoscenti of the kinetic arts. With Letterboxd as your steadfast cicerone, you'll traverse the opulent warp and weft of cinematic chronicling, etching an ineffaceable impression upon the archives of filmic disquisition. Enlist with us sans delay, and let your insatiable ardor for the craft of cinematic blaze with the fervor of a myriad of shimmering screens. Your most treasured motion pictures anticipate your perspicacious scrutiny and grandiloquent compositions, primed to be enshrined in the sacrosanct annals of your Letterboxd heritage. Step forth into the exalted world of Letterboxd, where the art of cinema is celebrated with the grace, wit, and refinement that befit only the most learned and sophisticated members of society. Your journey to cinematic nirvana awaits, and it all begins with a single step. Onward, my friends, to Letterboxd.
So we're both going with the Baroque gentleman, then, is what you're saying.
Awesome.
Outstanding. Okay. How to do an award season, Andy? This seems like one that probably had some attention paid.
Yes, definitely attention paid during award season for this one. It had 17 wins with 14 other nominations. At the Oscars, it had 7 nominations. Best Picture, but lost to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Best Director, also to Milos Forman for that film. And Adapted Screenplay as well. It did win Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Set Decoration, Best Costume Design. No surprise on any of those. And it won, as we were talking about the score, Best Music for Scoring of Original Song and or Adaptation. And so again, that speaks to this period of time where they had a separate score category for this. Because best score, that went to Jaws. But it was an adaptation, hence the win here. At the BAFTAs, it was nominated for Best Film, but lost to Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Kubrick won for Best Director. It was nominated for Costume, but lost to The Day of the Locust. It did win Best Cinematography and Art Direction. It was nominated, but lost to Rollerball, which we've talked about before. And last but not least, at the New York Film Critics Circle Awards, it was nominated for Best Film, but lost to Nashville, and also lost Best Director to Robert Altman for that film as well. So it's interesting. You can see it was recognized, but it was one of those films that wasn't always winning, like Best Picture and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you get a sense of that. At least it was in the conversation, but the fact that it didn't win Best Picture, that it didn't win Best Director, that it didn't hit those high-profile awards, maybe why we're talking about it with such a sense of surprise, right? That it was kind of a sleeper that gets to sneak back up on us 50 years later. I imagine that when you started looking for numbers, you were effectively Steamboat Willie at the wheel, like hee, like just really excited because after a long drought, you've got numbers to report.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard with those Ju-on films. Those were very difficult to find anything. But here, I was able to find what I needed. Kubrick had a budget of $12 million for his period film, or $70.7 million in today's dollars. The movie premiered in London, December 11th, 1975, then opened here in the States, December 18th. It went on to earn $20.2 million at the box office, or $119 million in today's dollars. All told, that lands it with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $261,000. Not the commercial success Warner Brothers was hoping for, but at least its European grosses helped it get into the green. And honestly, that's like speaking to why it might be remembered better now than it was at the time. It really taps into this. The critics loved it. It had a lot of recognition, but it wasn't like audiences really struggled with it at the time, found it boring. Even critics, like some critics, they were like, it's not as exciting as it could be. So it's interesting. It took its time, but people have really kind of reappraised it and found a lot more going on.
Worth it. So glad to watch this. It's a lovely addition to the catalog. I'm glad you're taking us down this particular 50-year memory lane.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of continue this and just see how the rest of this plays with these other films that are all celebrating their 50th birthdays this year to see how they hold up,
Yep.
All right. Well, that is it for today's conversation. Next week, we continue our series looking at Chantal Akerman's Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080 Brussels. And we'll be right back for our ratings.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a gentleman of modest means, upon discovering a collection of fine film podcasts, must immediately contrive to elevate his station by becoming a member. Yes, dear listener, consider this your invitation to a most distinguished society, the next real family of film podcasts. For a sum so meagre it would scarcely purchase a second-rate Perwig, you may lay claim to exclusive privileges enjoyed only by the well-bred and well-listened. For but $5 a month, or $55 a year if you favor thrift, you shall receive ad-free episodes, for one must not be interrupted mid-dialogue, early access so you may lord your timely insights over less fortunate peers, extended edition because, like all fine things, our shows improve with length, invitations to live recordings, the modern salon, and entry into the secret parlors of our members-only Discord, where ideas are exchanged, alliances forged, and reputations occasionally tarnished. Join now at truestory.fm/join, and let it be said that you are not content to merely listen to great film conversation. No, you possessed it, claimed it, supported it with the vigor of one who's accidentally inherited an estate and intends to ruin it magnificently. The next real membership, for those with impeccable taste and the loosest of purse strings.
Love it.
We're so dumb. Letterboxd, Andy. Oh, it's Letterboxd time. I feel like I could predict where this is going to go. What are you going to do? Letterboxd.com/thenextreel. That's where you can find us. We're going to apportion our hearts and stars. Where do you land?
This is it's a solid film, and it's funny because I knew I had watched it before and I remembered the cinematography, but I didn't really remember much of the story. And I guess this is one of those films, as you watch it, you can go, oh, I can see why I didn't really remember this. The way that it plays, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I walked in going, I don't know. I don't know how high this is going to be on my list of Kubrick films for me. But then it just like totally took me by surprise. I really loved it. So I'm like, does that mean I should give it 5 stars, or is it more of a 4 stars? I feel like I'm going to go right between and do 4.5 and a heart for me. That's where I'm going to land.
As you know, I am plagued with certainty in my reviews. There are no half stars. And so I am charged with deciding, is this a 4-star film or a 5-star film? And on this watch, I have to say, I'm going with the 5.
Wow, look at that. All right.
I know. 5 and a heart. Even as it is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a 3-hour movie that feels like a 3-hour movie. I am just overall delighted by my experience with Barry Lyndon. I love it.
Excellent.
I recommend it. I want other people to watch it. And they'll probably think that it's too long, too. So
yeah, your wife will probably be like my wife.
Yeah, right. Just done. This is right. Part 2? Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that averages out to 4.75 and a heart, which will round up to 5 stars and a heart over at our Letterboxd account, which you can find us there at The Next Reel. You can find me there at Soda Creek Film. You can find Pete there at Pete Wright. So what did you think about Barry Lyndon? We would love to hear your thoughts on this one. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
So one of the things that you teased in the beginning is that you were looking for the book and you never found it.
I did find it.
You did find it, but not one that was accessible by you.
Only in Spanish or German, right?
Spanish or German. So I have a review from Fang's Gender. This is a half-star review from Fang's Gender, and it starts with this point. It still fascinates me that no one seems to have ever read the book this was based on or read up about the court trial the book was based on. Barry Lyndon has been filtered so much that he's somehow a young Irishman who's seen hardship and war, and that's why he is the way he is. When the truth is, the original guy, Andrew Robinson Stoney, was a member of the Anglo-Irish gentry occupying Ireland. He was a Bluebeard, a corrupt sheriff, a serial rapist and domestic abuser who lied, cheated, and bribed his way through life. He was so egregious, in fact, that he actually died in prison after he was convicted of kidnapping his second wife, Mary Bowes. So maybe not an anti-hero so much as a figurehead of white cishet guys whose audacity knows no bounds. Also, personally speaking, this is an exceptionally boring movie. I love historical dramas, but they have to have characters who have drive and motivation, not just because the story needs them to. For instance, in real life, Stoney only married Mary Bowes because he slandered her in the newspapers through an editor he bribed, challenged the editor to a duel, then pretended to be mortally wounded so he could guilt-trip Bowes into marrying him on his deathbed. Then he miraculously recovered, which is a horrific and crazy story, but none of that shows up in this movie. Instead, they just sort of end up together as a foregone conclusion, just waiting for her husband to die. It's bizarre. Okay.
Well, to be fair,
yeah,
Kubrick wasn't making the film based on Andrew Robinson Stoney's life. He was basing it on Thackeray's novel. So if this guy should be pissed at anyone, it should be Thackeray.
Let's say that. But the other thing I want to say is I think this movie is better enjoyed as a work of fiction, because I think it probably is so adjacent to the true story that it's not even worth considering it as an homage. This is about a guy. And I will also say the review right below this is a one-liner from S. Boucher, who says, we've got to stop letting men think they're interesting or capable of anything. And I think that also says something powerful about the movie. What do you got?
Very funny, very funny. I have a 5-star review by Reese, who has this to say. If I lived in the 1700s, I too would just go on absolutely every side mission imaginable.
That's exactly it. Yet another contemporary interpretation of Barry Lyndon.
Indeed.
Thanks, Letterboxd.